I think continually of those who were truly great, who from the womb remembered the soul's histories, through corridors of light where the hours are suns endless and singing, whose lovely ambition was that their lips, still touched with fire, should tell of the Spirit clothed from head to foot in song, and who hoarded from the spring branches the desires falling across their bodies like blossoms. What is precious is never to forget. The essential delight of the blood drawn from the ageless springs, breaking through rocks in worlds before our earth. Never to deny its pleasure in the simple morning light, nor its grave evening demand for love. Never to allow gradually the traffic to smother with noise and fog the flowering of the Spirit. Near the snow, near the sun, in the highest fields, see how these names are feted by the waving grass and by the streamers of white cloud and whispers of wind in the listening sky. The names of those who in their lives fought for life, who wore at their hearts the fire center. Born of the sun, they traveled a short while toward the sun and left the vivid air signed with their honor. We gather today to celebrate the life and mourn the death of Donald Ario Patterson. Don was a father, a son, a brother, a friend, a husband, a pilot, a teacher. He was kind and caring and fun. Some will say that he died too soon, and others will say that his death was a respite from the suffering that came with ALS. Both are right. Some will say they are grateful for the time with him. Others will say they are angry that he is gone. Both are right. Today in the service, we will honor those contradicting realities. We will honor the life of a man who is dearly loved. We will celebrate who he was, and we will mourn the fact that he is in so many ways no longer with us. My name is Nathan Ryan. I'm the senior minister here at the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. Before we go any further, I am aware what it feels like in here, temperature-wise. We have the AC cranked down, but I think so long as it's colder outside than inside, this is the reality. So just my housekeeping bit, I'm sorry it's warm. We can invent some theology on that if you'd like, but that's where we are. This was not Don's church, but it might be as close to a church that he had. He was raised Episcopalian. He was even an altar boy. I'm not exactly clear on when he left the church or what even his specific beliefs are. We are conducting this service here because Don married into a Unitarian family. In fact, the now minister emeritus of this church conducted their wedding. I first met Don in 2013 after his father-in-law Jim died, and soon after his mother Harriet died. In fact, we memorialized her right here in the sanctuary 10 years ago. Because this may be the first time for some of you at a Unitarian church, and just so you know, we are streaming this, so if you're online, this may be your first time watching a service here. Here are some things that you may be able to expect from this service. First, we are going to the best of our abilities, honor Don as the full human being that he was. That means allowing the good and the challenges to show up. Every person who lives deserves to be remembered as fully human. Their strengths and their weaknesses combine to make them the beautifully complicated creatures that you are. Pretending someone is all good or only defining them by their flaws is not fair to that person. So today we will let Don exist in his fullness. Also, usually I meet with a family to try to figure out what the flaws are that I can really kind of get us ready for, and I couldn't find them. I'm not saying they're not there, I just couldn't find them. Second, it is okay to laugh here today. Yes, this is a somber event, but Don's life included joy, and if we are going to truly celebrate him, we must celebrate all aspects of him. And that means you may hear funny stories, and it is okay for you to laugh here. Third, we do not get to choose when we are born, and most often we do not get to choose how or when we die. We should not be defined by our birth or our death. However, birth and death are part of our story. It is impossible to tell Don's story without talking about the very difficult last year of his life with ALS. It is important because it was a major struggle for him, his friends, and his family. And it is important because in many ways this disease made his end more painful and complicated than feels fair to someone who lived such a loving life. We should let this fact and this struggle exist in this space today as a part of his story, but it should not define him, nor should it be the main character of this service. Fourth, we will not be able to achieve our goal here today. What I am guessing that most of you want is for him to be healthy and alive, and that is something out of all of our power. Short of that, it is reasonable to want his entire life story to be told in this hour. That is also impossible. He is too complicated to ever condense into 1 hour. Instead, we are going to give you a chance to remember him. When you hear a story or a song or see a picture that reminds you of him, your body will fire off the same chemicals it did when he was standing in front of you. Your muscles will tense and loosen in the same way they did when he told a joke or cooked you food or taught you how to fly a plane. So he will not be memorialized from up here. He will be memorialized within each of you as you hear something that reminds you of him. So he will be alive in you for this hour. Finally, this church has no promises of an afterlife. I am not saying there is or is not one. I simply do not know. I want to believe that Don is in a place where he's reunited with those he loved who have already died. I want to believe that his spirit is still with us. I want these things to be true, but I do not have the authority to tell you. Here is what I do know. Don was on this earth for 70 years. His body was made up of atoms that have existed since the beginning of time. These atoms have made up stars and planets and dirt and animals. And for too short of a time, they came together to make one person. And these atoms have moved on, and they are now making other and different and amazing things. But the life that Don lived, the impact of his love, these will continue to live on through each of you. They will live on as you are more kind, more loving, and more creative, all because you knew him. So I'll invite you to rise. Let's sing our opening hymn. This is one we've been singing in church lately.
This land is burning, no seed is growing in barren ground. Oh, healing river, send down your waters. Oh, healing river, send waters down. Let seeds of freedom awake and flourish. Let deep roots nourish. Let tall stalks rise.
One of the ways that we traditionally start a service here at a Unitarian Church is by lighting a chalice. So I would like to invite his son Brad up to light. And we say together, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love. I would like to invite Don's friend Bob Knight up to come read a poem.
Good afternoon. Appropriate to read about flight. This is from John Gillespie McGee Jr., but it really is about Don Patterson. Oh, I have slipped the serried bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed, enjoying the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds, and done 100 things you've not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung, high in sunlit silence, hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up, up, the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the wind-swept heights with easy grace, where never lark nor even eagle flew. And while there in silence, lifting mine, I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. Thank you.
Our eulogies today are not going to tell Don's story in chronological order. Like I said, we're not going to encapsulate him in this hour. So our goal is for you to hear stories from people who knew him that can offer snapshots of who he is. So I'm going to actually invite his brother, Bob, to come on up. And Marion, if you want to come and sit with me. Okay, then go ahead, Bob.
Is there any water up here? Is there any water up here?
No, but I can go get you some.
That's right. Yeah, I might do that. Yeah, thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm sorry. For those of you who don't know me, let me introduce myself. I'm Robert Patterson, Don's older brother. As I look out from this podium today, I welcome those many faces that I recognize. And then many more I don't. It's good to know that Don had so many friends and touched so many lives. I'm looking forward to celebrating his life with all of you today. 1953 to 2023, 70 years. That beginning and that ending miss a lot about life, especially about Don's life here in Baton Rouge. Don came to Baton Rouge for a better job. He met and married Maura. They raised a son, purchased 2 homes, all here in Baton Rouge and less than 5 miles from his in-laws. His interest in flying started with soaring over the countryside in Bloomington, Indiana. And then after arriving in Baton Rouge, he became a pilot and eventually a flight instructor. He had many numerous students, some of whom may be here with us today. For the most part, Don really enjoyed working at LSU because it provided a space for his intellectual freedom, and a good university is a wonderful place for inspiration. It was through his life and his connections here that I've come to appreciate the hidden value of living most of your life in one single location. Don's history in Baton Rouge all began in the summer of 1979. At that time, I remember talking with Don about his work for Data Domain in in Bloomington, Indiana. Back then, Data Domain was an early computer store, and it was only the 12th commercial outlet in the United States to use the phrase personal computer in its marketing, because it sold both the Altair and, of course, the Apple I computers. Don worked on numerous design projects with and for the owner. Towards the end of his time at Data Domain, Don worked on numerous design projects with and for the owner. Towards the end of his time at Data Domain, Don started design work on an instrument package that was, I think, intended for GM's assembly plant in Fort Wayne, Indiana. However, Don never got the chance to finish his design or build the package, and he spent most of his time driving to and from Fort Wayne, Indiana, in order to repair somebody else's failed package. The drive to and from Fort Wayne really wore on him because it was a long drive, and in addition to repairing somebody else's equipment, he hated the idea of assembly line. He thought it was a soul-killing experience. Finally, it was a combination of these sporadic paychecks and the long drives back and forth to Fort Wayne that pushed Don to seek out new job opportunities. He told me all about this in a phone call, and that's when I told him that the LSU chemistry department was looking for a mass spectrometry operator, and I didn't know if he would be interested. He was, so I took his resume to Klaus Fischer, who chaired the committee. After reading his resume, Klaus Fischer was very enthusiastic, and the rest, as they say, is our history. I have enjoyed being Don's brother. Don has a special place in my heart because he and I shared some difficult times in our younger years. At that time, we relied a lot on each other. And except for my family, I think I spent more time with and talking to Don than with any of my acquaintances or other relatives. We shared many common interests that included movies, science, technology, history, and science fiction. Even after long separations, he and I could pick up a conversational thread as easily as if one of us had just left the room for a brief phone call. I will miss that familiarity and those rambling conversations. As a more practical matter, I will also miss Don because he is the last living contact to our shared childhood. And I will make mistakes because memory is fragile, and now even less trustworthy because there is no longer another witness to our shared past. Don was one of those people that we naturally enjoyed being around, and this desire was really independent of any necessity or purpose. For me, this feeling probably has a foundation built on our shared values, and especially because Don could make me crack up with his dry wit. When people talk about innovation, they often forget that innovation has two components. The first component is identification of a problem that needs to be solved. A second component belongs to the innovators who actually solve the problem. Don very clearly was an innovator who solved problems. Although I can't speak to all of Don's technical accomplishments, I will say that he was dedicated and diligent to solving the task at hand. Don truly was a self-learner and a genuine self-starter. He moved confidently and rather seamlessly between analog and digital applications, often combining them as needed for his electronic instrument designs. These skills got him into some rather interesting and cutting-edge technology. One of them was to do with solid-state probe designs for magnetic resonance spectroscopy. RNA and DNA analysis on a chip, and more recently, designing portable seismic detection equipment intended for a possible Mars landing mission. He derived great satisfaction from both designing and constructing a device that provided his best solution. Juan, if you get the chance to send an instrument package to Mars, would you please etch Don's name on one of the circuit boards? I think he'd like that tribute. Don was quiet, he was self-effacing, he did not brag, and he did not bloviate. If you asked him a question, he'd give you his best answer. He would not waste any time arguing with you or trying to convince you. For example, if you asked him if the world was flat, and after his explanation, you believed the world still to be flat, that was fine by him. His only response, and this would be on a bad day, would be something like, "Do call me when you locate the edge." Don had more patience as a father than I ever had or ever will have on my best day. I remember once how he got into a fender bender on Airline Highway after trying to return home from daycare or school with Brad, who at that time was around 4. After the accident, Don's car was drivable, but Brad refused to believe it, and he declared to Don, "I do not drive in damaged cars." Unable to convince Brad that all was safe, Don called home and waited for more to come and pick up Brad before also heading home. Even after Don got the car repaired back home, he had to carefully inspect the car with Brad in order to obtain Brad's final approval and consent that the car was now sufficiently safe for transport. Sometimes Don's focus was so tight, he could become a bit oblivious. For example, one day he was rushing off either to fly or to give flight instruction out of the Baton Rouge airport. He was late, and he wound up speeding through the S-turns on the 110 near the governor's mansion. A state trooper pulled him over, and after running wants and warrants on Don and the car, the trooper asked Don if he wanted to come back and visually confirm the speed on the radar. Don replied, "No thanks, I'm in a hurry." Looking back over this last year or so, there were several rather odd and unexpected manifestations of this ALS disorder. For example, Don developed a series of different and rather non-Don-like obsessions and behaviors. And these included a strong dislike of glitter. I get this one. It gets everywhere and into everything. He also developed a fixation on perfection, as when he and Brad rebuilt the interior of Brad's van, Don would become fixated and sidetracked by some small detail that just wasn't quite right to his liking. And then there was this one, which is my favorite. He was determined to keep the kitchen counters free of clutter and the floors clean. You'll appreciate how difficult this task is if you've ever been into the Patterson kitchen. Looking around, you'll immediately realize that this kitchen functions both as a place to make good food, and it also is a space that doubles as Mora's shop and workbench. I also have to acknowledge that during these last few months, Don pushed away friends simply because he didn't want to waste energy or time on self-pity or friends who might fuss over or patronize him. However, I also firmly believe that Don's focus and willpower are a testament to his character. Towards the end, only Mora really appreciated how much he was running on fumes. After his last trip to urgent care, Don finally came to accept his ALS diagnosis, and then I think he just gave up his struggle. I have mixed emotions about Don's passing. On one hand, I'm glad his suffering was not prolonged by being bedridden for an extended period of time. However, this last year or so was very difficult for those who loved him, and my heart goes out to Mora and Brad. However, I hope you too will remember Don from those better times and keep him in your thoughts as you leave here today. And when you do think of Don, I hope those memories will bring a smile to your face as they do to mine. I had a wonderful brother, and I will miss him every day. Thank you.
I haven't seen some of you. Hello. Don Patterson was an excellent son-in-law. He was a kind, decent, hardworking, fun person with a wonderful sense of humor. And he became a much-loved member of our family. And along with our daughter, he gave us our only grandchild, Bradley, who is also much loved. Don worked at LSU, keeping the scientific instruments working and writing software for experimental projects, and very generously keeping my electronics, my computer and my phone, in working order. Don loved flying. He also was a flight instructor who taught many people to fly, including his son. And I've heard that he was an excellent, patient, and thorough instructor. Don also loved travel and adventure. As you saw in the film, he loved climbing mountains, rafting in swift waters, kayaking with orcas, which I thought was rather intrepid. And when I moved to a high-ceiling condo and could no longer get on ladders, he was at my condo high up on ladders, fixing high-up things with all the sure-footed confidence of a mountain goat. It was a sight to see. Don was in very good health. Pilots had to be. They were tested every year. And in his vigorous retirement, he was struck with ALS. And he fought the long, slow decline heroically. He ate diligently when swallowing was very difficult. He walked every day when his muscles were mostly gone. The first thing Don lost was his voice. And if you can't talk to the tower, you can't fly. And Don loved flying. I think it's virtually unheard of for an ALS patient to be going to Starbucks for coffee every day, including the last day of his life. He walked into his bedroom and got himself ready for bed on the last night of his life. Don's life was fully, richly, joyfully lived and heroically fought for to the very end. No person can do more than that.
Next, we're going to invite up his son, Brad Patterson, and then Juan will come next, and then Maura will finish us off.
Thank you again to all of you for coming. It's great to see everybody here. I wish we were together under happier circumstances. His death has given me obviously a lot to think about. So this is kind of going through that processing which I have done, thinking about what possibly good could come from death. Death is horrible, and death is wretched, and death is cruel. And I don't know why it came for him so soon. He was very healthy, apart from the ALS, until his last day, and I could have reasonably expected 10, 20, maybe even 30 more years with him, which to me at 27 is an entire second life. So today, as I stand before you, I not only mourn my father, but also all of those future memories I expected to have with him. While death is painful, I am still left with the knowledge that it's inescapable and it's as natural as life. And I believe that even in this dark place, there is some good to be found. I'm thankful beyond measure for the time that I had to spend with him. I'm grateful that I got to know him as the kind, caring, lighthearted man that he was. I'm grateful that I knew him and that he knew me, and that I got to experience the beautiful uniqueness of his personality and be shaped by his parenting. And I'm grateful for everything that he taught me over the years. As a father, he was also subtle in his guidance, and he taught me more by example than ever telling me outright any specific lesson. He was the reason that I was largely inspired to go to college for engineering. He never suggested this to me, and he was even surprised when I told him that that was my decision. I think he was happily surprised, but our many scientific discussions and readings over the years kindled this flame. When I was young, instead of reading me regular kids' books before bed, we would read very dense stories about scientific or sci-fi or military history. Together we were reading stories about decoding the German Enigma during World War II. Plenty of stories about the many early pioneers of aviation. We would read stories about the military's investigation of UFOs or submarine operations during the Cold War and countless other topics like this. He also taught me many valuable lessons about patience and safety. So maybe he learned from this story of getting pulled over on a rush on the way to the airport. Because I think a very valuable lesson he taught me was in a similar situation. So since he was a flight instructor, obviously when I wanted to become a pilot, he was the natural one to be there and teach me. He was an excellent teacher, well-organized, knowledgeable, helpful, patient, as any good teacher should be. And at the end of my training, I was scheduled to take an examination, an FAA examiner, called a check ride to check my proficiency. And that morning, I don't know why, I don't know what happened, if I woke up late, what was going on, but we were running behind schedule, and he was the one that was going to drive me to the airport. And I remember sitting in the car and just becoming quietly infuriated with his calm and what I perceived as slow driving. He wasn't breaking the speed limit, he wasn't in a rush. Meanwhile, I'm behind schedule. So we get there, I jump out of the car, I rush through, I quickly do my pre-flight inspection and get into the air to go meet the examiner. And as soon as I land in the next airport to meet the examiner, he walks out and points out that my fuel cap is loose. So luckily, everything was fine, I didn't fail, and I, in fact, passed my check ride that day. And honestly, I don't think I understood the lesson immediately, but over the years it has sunk in. While he was methodical and patient to avoid mistakes, I often found myself making such mistakes in haste. Even in his death, he still continued to teach me. So this is shortly after we received his ALS diagnosis. I was back for Christmas, and we went down to the World War II Museum to just spend a day together there. And I offered to drive, but of course that offer was flatly refused. He was going to be the one to do it, even if he did have ALS. and he was a very safe driver. But anyways, after a day of admiring old aircraft and other World War II weaponry, we were stopped at a traffic light waiting to get on the interstate home. And he starts to roll down the window, and at this point I realize that there's a homeless man coming up to the car, and about this time the light turns green. But he calmly takes out his wallet, gives the man some money. The people behind us are starting to honk and get impatient, and once he's done, he drives on. And I was just struck by the kindness of this act. Here my father was just recently diagnosed with a terrible illness, cursed with a pretty awful fate. I think we can all agree. And even in that state, he still had the time to perform a small act of kindness. And I was also struck with the immediate realization of how jaded I had become in some ways. Here I was, relatively healthy and carefree in my 20s, and I didn't even realize that this man was sitting there. I was just too focused on other things. So even in his dying and death, he subtly taught me how to be a better man. I learned other things in his passing as well. I gained a new appreciation for life. Without death, there is no life. I was reminded how precious it is. I was reminded how important it is to live and love and laugh and cherish not only all the moments I had with him, but all the moments I have had and will have with all of you, my friends and family. His death subtly changed the purpose of my life. Now not only am I living for myself, but I carry him with me. And in some small way, I live for him and carry on his legacy in my own way. In closing, I want to leave you with this thought. While death may be unforgiving and harsh, it can also be a powerful teacher. My father's life and passing have taught me that even in the face of these dark moments, there can still be light. We can find meaning and kindness and inspiration. So today, not only do I mourn, but I celebrate the time I had with him, the lessons he shared, and that love that will forever live in my heart. Let us remember that it's not the length of the life that matters, but the depth of the impact that it has had on those around us. My father's impact was immeasurable, and I thank you all so much for being here to honor his memory with us today. Thank you.
We don't measure the quality of a book by how long it is.
I'm going to say a short prayer in Spanish. I think Don might have liked that, and Brad suggested that I do so. Estimado Señor, te damos gracias por nuestros amigos y por nuestras familias. Cuida de todos los que no conocemos, sobre todo los recién nacidos. Ayúdanos a nunca perder de vista la felicidad que nos rodea y ayúdanos a seguir buscando la fe en ti. It doesn't seem fair to spend only a few minutes remembering my luck at having known Don Patterson for over 30 years. I think that a lot of you may have known him better in other ways. I knew him as my closest collaborator in science. When I enter my lab, I'll be surrounded by Don, by all the ideas that Don generated. He translated my problems into solutions with his skill and inventiveness as an analog instrument designer. He was unassuming because he seemed to have a great sense of self-worth. I've often admired that trait, and I've tried to learn to develop it too. At his job, Don worked surrounded by many pretentious people, but he wasn't affected by that. He loved to dress in blue jeans, white sneakers, and a polo shirt, and it's partly in his honor that I'm not wearing a tie today. Anything more meant he was burdened by cold or an uncomfortable social obligation. so I think he hated to be in that suit, the photo you saw earlier on. He was happy to tell me he loved the role of facilitating the advancement of science. He loved connecting like-minded people, but who also had a kind disposition. I hope some of that positive attitude has rubbed off on me. I first met Don when he helped me with a technical problem. Then he worked in the electronics shop of the chemistry building. I was amazed by both the magic he performed with his electronic knowledge and yet how easy it was to be myself around him. Although I was totally ignorant of what he could do technically, he always made me feel welcome to display my ignorance. Eventually, he taught me electronics, Don's way. He didn't always hear my questions, but because he was so patient at putting up with me, I eventually learned enough electronics just to realize and appreciate that Don was uniquely talented and funny at all times. Don had a wicked sense of humor that helped me keep everything in perspective. He always insisted in giving humorous names to our lofty projects. When he worked with understanding the transmission of seismic waves in a giant sand tank, he called that project just Dune. If you all know the movie, that was what he called it after. When we worked with hydraulic fracturing experiments, the project simply became the Kraken. If you know South Park, you might know the reference. Although he took his creative work seriously, he kept it tamed with humor. Our last project to Mars and the Moon, he simply called Buzz Lightyear. I think he dreamed of leaving his ideas behind by way of his inventions. I think he was especially tickled when we started working with the NASA Marshall Space Flight Center. There on a visit, he was filled with satisfaction to chat with astronaut Jack Schmitt about his time on the moon, but over a beer. I think Don was an unappreciated gem, and I had the luck to have coffee with him 2 or 3 times a week for 30 years. He, of course, deducted these coffee missions as a business expense. Yeah, I was surprised too. Although to outsiders it may have seemed we were just wasting time, some of our best ideas developed over coffee. Don has not left me. His personal influence and his ideas continue to live on in what I do every day, and in my attitude I try to be a little bit, only the best parts, a little bit like him.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to write this as a letter to Don. Dear Don, since the first time we met, I felt pretty sure that you were the one for me. It only took a little bit of convincing to get you on board as well. When we married 32 years ago, we were both awed by the love and best wishes of our extended family and friends. Over the years, that unequivocal care and love lifted and supported us through many life events. Now the end of your life, as hard as it is, has once again highlighted for me the esteem in which you are held by all who crossed paths with you. I am humbled by the depth of high regard that you inspire in the wide group of those who know you. The loss of your amiable presence will be acutely felt. I miss you so much and can't really believe that you are gone. Godspeed, dear. I think I'm going to love you for a long, long time.
Could I invite us all into a moment of prayer and reflection? The God that we know when we see love and hope and kindness and family and forgiveness, whatever that thing is that brings us together and helps us keep going, be with us on this day. And help us hold the memory of Donald Ario Patterson. Help us to remember him in every way that was beautiful and complicated and human. Help us to see his connection to his parents and theirs and theirs. And help us to see him as a part of all of us. Help us to know that hurting hearts today can be healed. Help us to know that the love that he shared can be multiplied. And that grief doesn't win, it just becomes part of our life. Help us to know that the world was better because Don was here. And while he is gone, he is not gone. May your hearts be healed. May you know comfort. Amen. I would like to do a litany, which is when I say a line, you respond with, "We will remember him." In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we will remember him. In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, in the blueness of sky and the heat of summer, in the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, when we fly or see a plane, when we drive dangerously fast and infuriatingly slow, when we are lost or sick at heart. As long as we live, he too shall live. Donald Ario Patterson lived on this earth for 70 years. He was able to fly above what we could see for most of human history. He was able to grow up, to get married, to have a family. He was able to find ways to help the world be more connected and advance our collective understandings. He has lived on this earth, and his body has given all that it can. His body was cremated last month. His family is still deciding what will be done with his ashes. Some ideas are stalled out more for logistics because they want him to be scattered in some way around an airplane, which is logistically maybe complicated or legally complicated. I'm not making a statement there. He might be scattered at the sweet olive tree in their backyard, but those decisions can come later. So today, this marks the end of Don's service, but it does not mark the end of his memory. He lives on through each of you. May you be at peace. May you know love. Amen. Let's sing a closing hymn for this. I invite you to rise in body or spirit.
And the earth is my blue boat home. Try that again. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea. casting questions into the deep, drifting here with ship's companions, all weak handed pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on. Read the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor song. I was born upon on the fathoms, never harbor port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us, now and always. Amen. Go in peace.